It's the Friendly Fire Show, episode 242 for the end of July 2023. I'm one of your co-hosts, Steve Wright. Joining me, Mr. Ben Salter. I've called you Mr. a bunch of times now. You're so dignified. You're like a grown-up with a newly
Still
fixed
Mister.
roof.
Yeah, well, that was weeks ago, Steve. That's been sorted. No, it's we're still in the quiet period of gaming. All I'm playing is Final Fantasy 16. I almost forgot which one it is. Man, it's a long game. Still going. Haven't had time for anything else. Good, but like a bit long. Getting that point of like, let's wrap it up here, boys. I've got the gist of things. I think I've got a long time to go. I know that because it tells you on PS5 what your percentage is, and it's like it's not 100 yet, so it's a while away.
Well, I've been playing Diablo with Matt, and we're like level 70 or so, and like what did they say? If you get to level 85, you're halfway to level 100, which is just depressing. It's fun, but like it's
Good games,
starting
though, but they're
starting to
long.
get grindy. Like it just kind of like this is very rote at this point. The end game stuff is good. This new season's here around the corner. But like the new character thing, like Matt's like, why do you have to do that? I'm like, I don't know. That's something Diablo like, but it's yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about seasons later on anyway. It's in the notes. I don't know why I'm like trying to pretend like I'm guessing and we're going to talk about seasons, but that's definitely something that we can have a chit chat about. Before we do though, a interesting stat by I forget the names, not a fact based show, by two gaming industry bodies of some description, saying that 87% of games released before 2010 are no longer
Yeah.
like print. No, they're not in print. They're no longer for sale. They're basically unobtainable. 87% of games for 2010, which was 13 years ago. God,
Seems high.
2010 was 13 years
Yeah.
ago. That's insane. What did you've read this study? What do you think about it?
So it's basically near enough 9 in 10 games from that period. So we're talking like mid 360 PS3 generation and before, unobtainable. So like, you can't buy a new copy, you can't buy a digital copy, and no doubt if like Xbox back compat didn't exist, a bunch more 360 games would be out of print too. So it could have been even higher. So yeah, it seems high. I suppose like early days gaming, so like early 80s and around the video game crash time, and even post that, like pretty much all those things just disappeared off the face of the earth. Anything probably pre like Super Nintendo era even is just gone.
Yep.
So that I guess there's a lot there which adds up. Back when they used to make games in a couple of weeks or a few months, like they probably add up quite a lot. But it's not great for preservation and like accessibility of games. It's People have talked about this for a long time, but to have a number put to it probably makes it a lot more visible. Like this doesn't happen in other mediums. Yeah,
Yeah.
does this bother you?
Well, yeah, and like so there's a bunch of interesting stats that I was looking at. Like they compared it to like film, and you can still get like old black and white films on DVD or something. Like it's far easier. I forget the percentage,
Yeah.
but it was double digits for sure of availability, and they made some interesting observations. Like Stadia was a blip in time, really, but it was a video game platform that had exclusive titles and three Stadia exclusive games because they were digital only. They just simply don't exist. You can't play them because the platform's shuttered, servers are off. Like they're gone. And even like Game Boy, 3DS, Wii U games, like those eShops were closed down in March
All
of this
gone.
year. So there's hardly any of those games that were in print. Like, if you didn't have an old copy that you bought back when it came out, you're done. And you can't go and, like you were saying with Xbox back compat, you can't just go and like pop into the digital store and download a copy. Like it's well and truly gone. So it's
Yeah, that's an
strange.
interesting point. Even when things are preserved and if there is a digital copy you can buy. So the classic Pokemon games, great example. Like red, blue, yellow, crystal, silver, whatever, they were all available in the 3DS eShop. So up until like a month or two ago, they were still in print technically. You could go out and you could spend $10 or whatever they cost and actually buy and download them. Now they're not for sale anywhere. So it's they're now out of print suddenly. And it was kind of a game which went out of print when the physical copy died or stopped being sold, and then it came back digitally. But that doesn't mean it's back forever. Like we're seeing that digital stores close too. So it's going to be an ongoing issue from that point of view.
Yeah, well, and it's like a really specific case in point, like Hideo Kojima's PT, that playable teaser that was going to be the new
Hmm.
Silent Hills game that was out
Still
only as
got
a
it.
demo on PS4. I don't, because I don't have a PS4. Like, I have it. It's on my hard drive on my PlayStation 5, but it is not playable on my PlayStation 5. So,
Doesn't
like,
work.
yeah,
Not
I
a, it's an
have it.
unplayable teaser.
Yeah, I have it, but I don't
Hmm.
have it, which is, like, that's happening more often than not. And really, specifically in the video game space. I guess you could sort of draw parallels between DVD and Blu-ray and stuff to console generations, but it's pretty easy to go and
Not
get a
quite the same.
DVD, or a DVD player.
Yeah. And so I suppose there is the secondhand market, but it's just thinking about that, it's not great anymore in Australia. So like when we're in Japan, you can go to a bunch of shops and they just have hundreds of old games. And I bought Super Mario Land on Game Boy as just like a basically a memento. Like it's just an ancient game in perfect condition and it costs $15. And I was like, I'll buy that. That if to buy that same game here would probably cost like $100 plus in that condition that it's in, and it's pretty rare. Like back in the day, like I'm talking 10, 15 years ago, EB Games used to sell retro games. They don't anymore. They used to be like Game Traders and Game. I think they both don't exist anymore. So to actually buy secondhand games, they're really expensive because there's not many places. It's like just basically like private sellers like eBay
Yep.
or maybe some real dodgy cash converters who have put a sticker over the top of the game anyway, and you've got to rip that off and rip open the box. So it kind of ruins the collectible element of it. So it's like 360 PS3 games are pretty cheap, but anything before that is outrageously expensive. If you want to buy a copy of actual GoldenEye or Ocarina of Time or something like that, we're talking like $200 plus.
Yeah, well, like the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer on Xbox isn't backwards compatible now, so I can't just like download a copy and buy it on the store. So I had to go to eBay and buy. It was like $100 to get a copy of Xbox Buffy, and then I only did that because we forgot we left an old 360 at Matt's parents' house when he moved out. So like they like, do you want this? When they moved, they're like, we don't use this. Take this. So I'm like, ooh, a 360. Like that plays like that is backwards compatible with any Xbox game, provided you have the disc. I'm gonna just go in like on a novelty buy this. But yeah, like it required that very specific piece of hardware that I hadn't had in my house for a couple years at that point, and then having to drop $100 on a game that was probably like $40 years before. I don't know what Xbox games cost. I bought it. I had it way back in the day. But yeah, like it's an expensive, and that's one game. It's an expensive, effort to, preserve gaming history or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. The secondhand market's not really viable, and Sony and Nintendo both care a lot less this generation, it feels like. Like up until basically Wii U, 3DS always had pretty decent virtual console libraries. Now they've just gone with the subscription, which means again you don't actually own those games. They could disappear at any time. So I would say they're out of print. Like you can't necessarily actually hold on to them. And they've done a pretty poor job. Like there's what 10 or so Nintendo 64 games on Switch Online, like, and it's been there for over a year, and they just very rarely release some. Same for all the other platforms. The PlayStation Plus Classic library is pretty poor. Like there's barely any PS2 games on there. There's, if any, there's maybe a couple.
Yeah.
They barely release any new PS1 games. Like they don't really care about it. And again, a few generations ago, you could buy heaps of PS1 classics on like the PS3 store.
Yeah, I
So
had I
like it's
had
just they
RE1,
care
2,
much
and
less.
3 on PlayStation 3 and Vita, and they're gone. And that was one of the selling points of PlayStation Plus. Ooh, we'll bring back all these PS1 games. So far, Resident Evil's come out, and it's off PlayStation Plus now. Like it came
Brilliant.
out, it's gone. If you didn't buy it, you don't have access to it anymore. It's Well, I guess it's still in the store, so you can still buy it. I think. I don't know. Anyway, I just want
I don't know. I think I still got
RE2
it.
and
But
3.
yeah, I don't know. It's not great.
And that leads to the
Yeah,
kind of
like
like weird discussion of like, there are ways that you can preserve some game history and play some of these games. And I'm speaking with my mouth kind of closed because it's dodgy and it's not legal. So if you are someone that wants to play like Resident
gray
Evil
area.
2, well, yeah, if you want to play RE2 on a console and you don't own like a GameCube or an original PlayStation, or I guess PlayStation 2 had back compat, didn't it? Some of them did.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah,
Yep,
like
did.
you can't, or and you're not willing to drop hundreds of dollars on buying like a secondhand console and a secondhand game. Like you can play this game on a PC as an example somehow. I'm not going to tell you how, but everybody knows. But like, yeah, it's that weird gray area, and you feel like you're a criminal because maybe you are, and that's not a great way
They're not for sale.
for you to. Well, yeah, exactly. And like, I have a DOS box copy of a Star Trek: The Next Generation of Final Unity, because if you go in my dad's basement somewhere, I have the CD in the basement. I just don't have it here, so I'm like, it's close
Eight
enough.
cups. That's where it is. I've got it. I ripped it.
Yeah, and if anybody
I
asks,
think the bigger
exactly,
issue
that's
with
exactly what happens.
the bigger issue with that is people who know what they're doing, and it's probably a pretty small crowd, which we would belong in, know how to do stuff like that. It's kind of like, if you really want something, you do know how to preserve games, you know how to rip copies of games, you know how to figure out how to make that work. The masses don't, and they don't know where to start, and they probably don't care about learning, and they just want to be able to play a game in the same way that you can just go onto any streaming service and play an old movie. Like, there should be, these barriers shouldn't exist, and I think that's the issue. Which, like, it should be way more accessible to people who don't have that knowledge. But it did get me thinking, how often do you actually play either a game or watch a movie or a TV show or read a book that's older than 2010? Like, I think in our minds, we think we're constantly accessing content that old, and we want to make sure it's available, and that's a good point. But I don't know that I actually engage with content that old as much as I used to. I feel like I've now kind of done all that stuff, and I'm mostly going to new stuff. But I think it's different for each medium, right? So that's maybe more games. I think I probably watch more old movies than anything else.
Yeah, I watch a lot. Like, I've the amount of times I've repurchased Star Trek movies and TV shows, because now they're in 4K. I've got, at least I've gone through 3 different iterations of those kind of things, like DVD, HD DVD, Blu-ray, 4K kind of things. Music, like I went and...
What about something new? Like something, how often would you watch something from like the 70s or 80s that you'd never seen before? Would you pick, like, I guess that's the equivalent of someone playing a game from the 90s, which they'd never played before now.
Books, yes. Music, yeah. But not...
Music's different, but yeah.
Movies, like, I don't know, like we watched the original, not the original, I guess it's the original movie, the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible. And like it was just like, ooh, this is
so
like,
retro.
This is peak late 90s. Yeah. This is not good.
It's a very different movie to the current ones. It's okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. And like music, it's not well, it would have been before 2010, because it was probably 2006, because Teddy Geiger, their music, only some of it's on Spotify, and I got into, like, I had a copy of their first album, Underage Thinking, and I'm like, oh, that's really good. And then I went to play it, and it's like, it's on Spotify, but it's not on Spotify Australia. So I went and found like a CD for like $7 and just like bought it and then ripped it to my computer, and now it's like in my local files, so it's in Spotify. But I don't know, like it depends on who you are and what you're kind of looking to do. I think it's easier to go and pick up an old book and it won't feel as dated. Games certainly do, but like sometimes that's nostalgia hit is exactly what you're after.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm thinking more people who don't have that nostalgic tie. So when it's something, so it's kids, right? So who haven't played the games that we're talking about that you can't get, do they actually care? Yeah, like I do go back to old games, but it's mostly stuff I've already played, like GoldenEye coming out this year, for example. There's not a lot of stuff that old that I've never played before, and I think I'm finally going to do it occasionally, like now and again, yes, but not heaps. Movies, I would say only if it's like a classic that I somehow come across and I'm like, you know what, I've never seen Godfather 2 or something of that level. I'm like, I better watch it. More often than not, it's like on a plane or something. I watched like Al Pacino's Hostage movie, whatever it's called, that's apparently well known, flying back from Japan because there was no good new releases. But it's like, I wouldn't have just watched that randomly here. TV shows, not really. Like I watch, like Simpsons, Seinfeld, that type of stuff that's old, but I've already watched that. I probably wouldn't start like an 80s TV show now that I've never seen. There's so much new stuff.
Yeah, and they're too old.
Music, I think, is different. I think like music is not really out of print in the same way that we're talking about everything else. Certainly not like games. So maybe something's not on Spotify, but normally it's accessible. You can get it on something, and it's still for sale somewhere. So I think that's a bit different. And you come across music a lot easier because you're listening on Spotify and it recommends something based on what you've listened to, and it's like, here's something you may not have heard before. It's easier to find a song than it is like an old song that you discover you like and a band that you then like than it is a game that's from the 80s, because you're not really recommended. Here's a game to try that's ancient that you'd never come across otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and like music is kind of timeless. Obviously, that's not true in every extent, but like a guitar sounds like a guitar, really. And if you think about video, like I don't know if we're watching stuff in the 80s because they, like Star Trek. I keep going back to Star Trek, but like Star Trek, TNG used like actual videotape. They didn't use, well, I think it used film, but a lot of TV used actual videotape, or they mastered it on videotape. So like they can't up-res it now, so it looks dated. And like there are films that, like Mission Impossible is a good example of it. Like the story was just stupid and it was like just peak 90s. But then you look back at like Alien or Aliens, and yeah, like the special effects weren't like a Marvel movie nowadays, but like it doesn't suffer from looking and being dated. Like it's just a solid effort. So I don't know, like in games are kind of a mixed bag. If it's stylized and like a Mario as an example, like isn't really going to look dated, but you go back to Crash or Spyro or Tomb Raider, even like it looks bad. Resident Evil is one of my favorite franchises, and I don't think I could tell a kid who's used to games now, oh yeah, go play RE1 or RE2, like the originals, because they'd hit the tank controls and just be like, why are you doing this to me? Did I offend you? Are you torturing me? Especially when you can go and play new RE2. Like, just it's the same-ish thing, just go. So like there's all that stuff to factor in, but I still miss my old games because I'm ancient.
Yeah, that 3D era, the first 3D era of games, is very much like the mastering to tape era of TV. Like it's hard to go back to that time when they thought they were stepping forward into something great, but it just doesn't hold up now. There's almost nothing, at least in that format, that's worth playing. The remastered of things like Crash, pretty good because they've just made just enough tweaks to make it make sense to your brain. I would say even like Super Mario 64 is probably the most accessible game from that era, and it's still hard to play on an actual 64.
Yeah. I don't
but
feel
like Super NES games
connection
hold up pretty well.
I don't feel the connection to Super Mario 64 because I didn't play it as a kid, and I was like, ugh, it's just like maybe I'll
I think
at the start
I think
pull
you
his
need
nose,
that.
but that's about it. And yeah, sorry to cut you off.
But like SNES games, I think hold up pretty well because they were like at the peak of 2D, and they kind of mastered them, and they're at a point where they didn't really have anywhere else to go. But I think kids would be like, "Is this it?" Like if you hadn't grown up with 2D games at all, you don't have again that nostalgia for it, and unless they've somehow gotten into them through more indie style games which do that, they'd probably be like, "Well, I'm used to playing a massive like AAA 3D, full on hundreds of millions of dollar game. Why are you asking me to play this like slow side scroller with a bunch of text on screen that I have to read?" I just don't see kids getting into it that much. I think the people who care about this, to go back to our very original topic, is probably us and people even older than us who grew up with these games, and it's just even if you don't play them, it's nice to know that the things you loved as a kid is still available. You could go out and buy a new copy if you needed to. You can get it on your new device if you need to, even though you'll probably never play it. It's nice to know it's there, and that's the thing that's kind of sad to lose a little bit.
Yeah, and it makes the need for like collections to like so much more important. And like we talked about it a couple weeks ago, Embracer Group like started up, and I don't know what happened to it. They've had some financial hardships, and they've been calling jobs left and right. I don't know what's happened to like the collection of retro video games that they've been storing in consoles and stuff. And that was like, I don't even know if that's a good way to do it. I don't think Embracer should have been responsible for that. Like, hopefully, like, the National Archives of Australia or the US equivalent is doing something similar. So, like, there's just a repository of this kind of stuff, at least for someone to curate and appreciate and pull things out when it needs to happen. And, like, private collectors are great and all that, too. But, like, that's the private in that is where I'm hitting, the wall, because it's
not accessible.
A private collection is just as useful to the masses as the Wii U and 3DS shop being closed, eShop being closed.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be fixed anytime soon. At least there's some awareness around it now, so that's pretty much all we can hope for. The other thing grinding my gears in games at the moment is seasons. It's kind of the opposite of losing access to old games. It's all new games being we need to have a season. Seems everything has a season now. What's the deal with seasons? Diablo 4 has a season 1 starting about now or very soon. Somehow a game like COD Modern Warfare 2, which has been out for less than a year, it's been out for like 6-7 months, maybe a little longer, 8-9 months. It's up to season 6. Battlefield 2042, which is basically dead already, is up to season 5. Fortnite's gone next level. It's up to chapter 4, season 3, which is they've added a next level to it. There's a bunch more.
They found like
What's
the
going
three
on?
characters that they haven't already put into Fortnite, so they just keep going. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's and like Destiny's at this season. I don't even know. There's too many seasons. It's this thing of everything has to just continue to pique your interest, and like it sort of gets you when the game first comes out. Like I know that when Halo Infinite came out and the multiplayer was so good and free and like it was gelling with me. I played seasons until my brain's fallen out and like, oh, I've got samurai outfits and I've got this, but like you also have to play these seasons if you want these generally part and parcel free goodies that come with them. Like you need to play them and grind them to get the stuff you want. So then you have the free samurai helmet or whatever, but then like you're kind of sick of playing the game and using the weird cosmetic item that you've received. So it's that weird loop of if you're not willing to just like dump money and buy all these microtransaction stuff, which is exactly why the seasons exist because that's why they want you. Like you lose, really.
Yeah, I think, well, there are a few problems. Like, one, the fact that we're up to season 6 of a 8-month-old game is like a TV show would take 8 years to get to, or 6 years to get to season 6. And that's kind of, in my mind, a season is a year.
It
Like,
would be
that's what it
canceled by
should be. And the
season
fact
4,
that,
but anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, or what does Netflix do? Cancel at season 2. It should be like UK TV shows, 2 seasons and a Christmas special. Like, that's it. And I'd probably still play games like that. I think that's my problem with, like, so I played a fair bit of Modern Warfare 2 when it came out. And I hadn't played at all from probably like late January up until last week. And it's season 6 or something. There's a bunch of different stuff. When you start up the game again, it just spams you with a million screens being like, new season, new thing. I skip all that. I don't care. The menus look different. There's something, it's like it's fundamentally the same game, but like I've missed a bunch of stuff. In trying to engage players to keep playing to get the cosmetic or whatever, I'm finding them really off-putting to then go back to later, which didn't used to be a thing pre-seasons. I used to be able to like jump out of an online game and come back a few months later, and it was fine. But I'm finding like myself pushed out basically because I'm not up with the current season.
Well, and I think there's all this weird stuff that's also trying to pull you in. Like, not only do they want you to buy, like, the pack to get, 17 tiers of battle pass skips or whatever, but, like, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, and Warzone has, like, a crossover with The Boys. And, like, unless you're a diehard The Boys fan, you're probably like, yeah, okay. And I think maybe Fortnite's to blame for it because, like, everything that has ever existed now is in Fortnite. And it maybe used to be cool to be like, oh wow, like Superman's in this thing. And that's a novelty. And now, like, you can get Superman in, like, you can give Superman a fully automatic weapon and have him run around in Fortnite for some reason. And, the same for the Master Chief and 8 million Marvel characters. And, like, the novelty of that has also worn off. Like, it's just, and it's like, I think publishers are running out of ideas. So it's like, I don't know, put the boys in Call of Duty. That'll keep people in playing for another 2 months. So
Yeah,
it's hard not to be jaded. I guess I'm jaded about most things nowadays, but it's just like, ugh, it just seems like a cash grab.
absolutely you are. Are you still jaded about Resident Evil remakes? Because they keep talking about it and not delivering anything. It keeps being in the news with basically the same thing, which is Capcom vaguely saying we might do Code Veronica. We know you want it. They didn't even say that. They basically just didn't say no, that they're only going to do numbered titles. So we've obviously had Resident Evil 4 remake this year. They said something very vague to the effect of we might do something which is not a numbered title next. But what do you think? Is this going to happen?
The last time Capcom talked about this, they said maybe, and now they're saying like maybe, but in different words. It makes more sense. They've run out of real Resident Evil games to remaster. Like, I guess they could do 5, but 5, like 6 was run and gun ish. 5 was the last.
They could do
kind
5.
of 5 was 4, but with a co-op partner. But I think, I don't know if it needs it. I think Code
Doesn't
Veronica
need
makes
it.
more sense.
It's older. it's old enough that it feels a bit dated. They could do one. I'm still on. They could do one fence of do a full on actual remake in that it's based on one, but it's a totally different game. It's based on the story. It's based on the plot and everything, but it's the same over the shoulder. Let's give it a crack like that. You're not a fan of that plan, but I think they should give it a go.
I feel like if they they missed that boat because they've gone 2, 3, 4. Like it's silly to go back to Resident Evil, but like maybe they could combine Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1
Oh yeah,
and kind of do something with that to sort of address that concern. I think it is important. I think Code Veronica is underrated. It was really, really good on the Dreamcast when it first came out. And it just wasn't given a sequel number, but like it had Claire and Chris. Like it's important to the story. It was very, I like spoilers, but not that this game came out at least before the 2000s, I think. So like Wesker's in it too. Like it's got all the trappings of a good classic Resident Evil game. I would much rather see it than 5, but also like I like 5. So if they're gonna give the RE4 treatment to RE5, which would basically have to be what they do, basically same but a little bit different. Like I think Code Veronica would be more in the line of 2 and 3, where it's storyline but far more modernized gameplay and stuff. Like I'd rather see Code Veronica, but I don't have my hopes up by any stretch, and I don't know why. It makes no sense. Like they could call it Resident Evil 5 and then make 5, 6 and pretend 6 didn't exist, like if they really wanted to make it a numbered one and think that's gonna draw people. I don't get it. They should do
it. They seem to be a cash cow. They seem to be able to make them pretty quickly by current development standards. They're banging these out in a few years as opposed to like a decade to make a game. So it seems to make sense. When they didn't obviously mention this game, they were just talking about non-numbered remakes. Is there anything else you'd remake from the non-numbered series?
I guess, well, there's Revelations. There's
that's even newer than 5 though.
Revelations was the one on the boat, and then Revelations 2 was Claire and Barry. Yeah,
like that's the episodic one. Yeah,
that's really pretty new, that one though. Yeah, and like I didn't think Revelations was that good, to be honest. Like it is truly a not numbered sequel. Whereas Code Veronica should have had a number, but like it was only on Dreamcast because Sega gave them extra money and they didn't want to sully the franchise, I guess. But I don't know. Just remake them all, I guess, or continue the story and give me something in 9. But don't give me the weird like 20 years later from RE8 thing that they coined at the end. Like go back to Chris and Jill and go back to that. Go back to destroying Umbrella because I think Umbrella's back, or Chris is in charge of Umbrella, but in a good... I don't remember anymore. Like, the stories are so stupid, but I still love them. So, just give me more. That's my answer.
Give me more, but that's fair enough. Yeah, I think you'll get more. So, no issues with that. We've had a game this year. It won't be for a while.
Well, just like the Britney Spears autobiography, give me more. That's definitely a sign to finish up. How do we find you on the internet, Mr. Salter?
I'm going to assume I'm off threads by now. Forget that. I'm still on Twitter, Ben_Salter. I might not see your tweet because I think Elon's blocking us now. We can only see a certain number a day or something. Whatever. Where do we find you?
Not on Twitter either. The tweet deck getting culled or switched up, so you couldn't use the multiple accounts that someone like me has to use. Like that was and the rate limiting. Yeah, final nail. SRightAU on most things, or you could read us on Stevivor, I'm sure. When a new game comes out and we have to write a review, which maybe will happen. Well, it's definitely going to happen in like August, I think, September. When do all the games come out this year? Then
they're out soon. There's heaps of games coming out. We'll be back soon to actually talk about games when we've actually played some that isn't Final Fantasy 16. Until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.